Hey, everybody. Welcome to Human Reaction Podcast. We are talking about the JFK Files, the new stir up in the Middle East, as well as the Autopen controversy on Biden's pardons. So it should be a fun episode. We got me and Kyle here doing it. Just the kids, no adults, just us.
All the people that know what they're doing are not here. So who knows what's going to happen with this episode? Whatever production snafus happen, blame them. They left us.
45 minutes it took us to get to this point, and we hope it'll actually turn out okay.
We will see. But since you're here, make sure to like, subscribe, do all the things on whichever platform you're on. Become a member, and you can get our special content that we do once a week. We do a special members only show as well called The Skiff, where I think later this week, I have a feeling we're probably going to be talking about some of these debacles with the Daily Wire stuff that's been going on. But we'll get to that when Friday hits. But yeah, I guess let's get started. All right, so I guess let's get into it. The JFK Files dropped hours ago, and I've been spending the past hour about kind of just seeing what's going on right now, and seeing actually what's maybe more interesting in these early stages of the JFK Files is seeing how the internet in general is reacting to it. Right now, actually, I want to pull up a tweet because I thought this was kind of a charming way of starting the whole situation is from Mike Benz. He said, "It's kind of charming that it's just a giant document dump with no attempt at any executive summary or overview whatsoever of key findings. They're just like, okay, we leave it solely and exclusively up to the internet to make sense of all this shit." Which is exactly how it feels right now. There's 80,000 documents that got dumped. And we're kind of just like, okay, now what? If you ask Grok, it's kind of a nothing burger, but that seems to be the internet consensus. So Grok is kind of looking at that right now. So more
Did
might
they
come.
upload it all as like a giant PDF, and then Grok
It's a bunch of PDFs.
or is it just looking at X posts and trying to deduce?
Grok's looking at X posts, right? And right now, there hasn't been enough time to look through everything. But that being said, a lot of the stuff that's coming out right now are things that we've known, and that's a big piece of it. And I think that's kind of the elephant in the room that everybody's like, we all already knew all this stuff kind of thing. But it's also, we're only a few hours into this right now. So who knows if there becomes more as time goes, right?
Right. Well, it's a lot of like particular actors. And if it's not an easily searchable file, I imagine that's going to be difficult to figure out. Okay, is Richard Helms in there? Is Alan Dulles in there? People like that. It's going to take a long time to process. But we're going to give the immediate reaction today because this is fascinating. It's an important moment. I think a lot of people are poo-pooing this. They're like, oh, well, it's not going to tell us anything. People said that before it dropped too. And I think with reasonable pessimism. But it's also like we're right now going to get extra and more information about potentially the most controversial and important development of the 21st century.
Yeah, one of the things that seems to have taken the internet by storm, really, like this was literally is instantly when I opened X, this was the first piece of the documents that I saw come up. Everybody's looking at this story about a guy by the name of Agent Underhill. And I would actually like to read this document because I think it's interesting. Now, this is one of these things where it was reported here. Let me share that screen. This was actually reported on by Playboy in 1968. So it's not like new per se, but I'm just going to read through this. So it's talking about, so the day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at the home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, he confided. And he was afraid for his life and probably would have to leave the country. Less than 6 months later, Underhill was found shot to death in his Washington apartment. The coroner ruled it a suicide. J. Garrett Underhill had been an intelligence agent during World War II and was a recognized authority on limited warfare and small arms. A researcher and writer on military affairs, he was he was on a first name basis with many of the top brass in the Pentagon. He was also on intimate terms with a number of high ranking CIA officials. He was one of the agency's unpeople who performed special assignments. At one time, he had been a friend of Samuel Cummings of Interarmco, the arms broker that numbers among its customers the CIA, and ironically Klein Sporting Goods of Chicago, from where the mail order, mail order, I can't read that, like the gun was allegedly purchased by Oswald. The friends from Underhill whom Underhill visited say he was sober but badly shook. They say he attributed the Kennedy murder to a CIA clique which was carrying on a lucrative racket in gun running, narcotics, and other contraband, and manipulating political intrigue to serve its own ends. Kennedy supposedly got wind and something was going on and was killed before he could blow the whistle on it. Although the friends had always known Underhill to be perfectly rational and objective, they at first didn't take his account seriously. I think the main reason was, explains the husband, that we couldn't believe that the CIA could contain a corrupt element every bit as ruthless and more efficient as the mafia. The verdict of suicide in Underhill's death is by no means convincing. His body was found by a writing collaborator, Asher Brines of the New Republic. He had been shot behind the left ear and an automatic pistol was under his left side. Odd, says Brines, because Underhill was right-handed. Brines thinks the pistol was fitted with a silencer and occupants of the apartment building could not recall hearing a shot. Underhill obviously had been dead for several days. So this was one of the documents that has been, that I've seen the most floating around on Twitter right now, largely just because, it implicates the CIA.
Most directly.
It's suspicious suicide, right?
Which I will note that it isn't that these elements that are mentioned in this memorandum, which is classified, it's a classified memorandum. If you look at it, secret RIBAT, and I looked at what that was, it's effectively a high level security security situation, right? So now, did the Playboy magazine article that reported this in 1968, did they have access to this memorandum, or was it just the reporting of the New Republic guy?
No, so the Playboy, it was actually an interview from Jim Garrison, who was the New Orleans DA and one of the main JFK investigators, like investigating into the assassination. And he had mentioned this story of this guy. So it was talked about in that Playboy interview with this guy. And that's as far as I could tell. I actually asked Grok. That seems to be the only real talk about this was from that Playboy interview before these documents. So, but it's also interesting because, like, when I view intelligence and when I view intelligence and these operations, and like if we are to say the CIA had its hand in this, like when I view these things, like oftentimes we use almost as a heuristic, like the CIA did this or Mossad did this or whatever, like that's a heuristic. But like these are very large organizations. In my opinion, the proper way to look at it is the way that this guy looked at it, where it's like cliques within the organizations are kind of doing their own activities. Like there are cliques within the CIA that are involved in narcotics running, drug running, organized crime, linkages with mafias, right? It's not like not necessarily the organization as a whole that's like, yes, we are going to kill the president, like that's not how this works.
Yeah. So when we got the JFK file release announcement back in January, I started diving in as far as I could to kind of try to get up on it. It's not something I've tracked like historically. I remember a long time ago when I very first got into politics and I started getting into libertarianism, I would listen to these podcasts with these, frankly, boomer-aged folks, and it would go to the JFK assassination every time. Like it would just wind up there. And I largely poo-pooed it, at the time. I largely was in that, well, that's like, boomer conspiracy theory stuff. I know there might be there. I'm skeptical of the state, but I'm just not going to go there because it's long ago and it isn't relevant. And I think some of the poo-poo-ness online comes from that place too, where it's like, this is just old news. We already know this. But I think for a substantial amount of the population, it's a very important part of the integrity of the institution of the intelligence agencies. And if the FBI was keeping track of this story and, had secret memorandums on it, that is a major tell there. Additionally to that, the key details that I see in that are that comport with what I've done in terms of reading a few books and watching a few documentaries. So I'm not an expert, but I have been looking at it pretty consistently for the last 2 months. And what I see is it largely fits into the dominant, theory of the post-Warren Commission, kind of questioning of everything that's happened since then over 4 or 5 decades now. And, everything from after the Zapruder film release, actually gets released on Geraldo Rivera in the 1960s and 70s. No, I think it was the early 70s. To, the most recent book on, I think it's 6 Seconds in Dallas or whatever it is. That there's the consensus narrative, alternative narrative. It isn't that that it was all a fake, though you can find stuff like that. Like it was like a screen, like Hollywood movie production sort of fake to fake his death, or that the guy in the Secret Service agent in the front reaches over and shoots Kennedy or something like that. The consensus is that a clique of the CIA connected to these Cuban exiles were the people who, in coordination with the mafia, were the ones who shot Kennedy. From the grassy knoll, as well as from the high up in the book depository type area in that area. So, and then lastly, the other part that really fits with this is the strange death of the person who claims to have knowledge of it, because those are all over. And you're talking minor witnesses. Like I remember one story from the book. It tells a story, and I forget her name right now. I really wish I had the time to be able to do all the research and present this better. But there was a woman who took a ride, basically a hitchhiking ride from New Orleans to Dallas, and noting the New Orleans connection, because there's some Oswald in New Orleans too, with 2 men who claimed, and one looked very Cuban, to be going to Dallas to assassinate the president. That lady ended up being killed on the left side of the road in a very mysterious manner.
That's the thing, is there's a lot of instances like that, which are just kind of like, oh, there's several witnesses that died mysteriously. Like that in itself is curious, It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's actually some other
100%.
Something else that you had said there, Dave, was kind of, there's this legitimization of the conspiracy that these documents do now. Because there are a lot of people that kind of like poo-poo a lot of the conspiracy stuff. And now there's like, okay, here are the documents from the government itself, kind of all in all its glory for the internet to sift through. It's no longer kind of like, oh, there's these crazies that are really interested in this conspiracy theory. It's like, no, there are 80,000 documents now that kind of justify the conspiracy. It doesn't necessarily prove the conspiracy, but it like justifies the questioning and it legitimizes the questioning. It kind of gives people that type of ammo, right? Like that's useful. And it's hard to, like, a lot of people are kind of undercutting that right now. It's like, there's a lot of people that are really intrigued by this, where 4 years ago, they would not be intrigued by this. Right.
Yeah. Right. And it's like things like the confidence in the institution, ultimately. Like the net good is if it takes people who are currently looking at with a naive worldview that the CIA would never do domestic operations. After all, there are rules against that, right? There are rules against that. They look at things, project like MK Ultra, be like, a couple experiments here and there, and we're fighting the Soviets and all that kind of stuff, and basically, hopefully, brings them into a more realistic worldview of seeing that the exercise of power by the intelligence agencies has been abused in very disturbing ways, and it's only a small leap from there to, are they doing it today? And making that leap from Project Mockingbird of controlling media institutions in the 1960s and 70s to the censorship industrial complex. And making those connections means like the institution itself is a problem, and hopefully opens the door for, in the long run, less institutional confidence and therefore a more political will to do something about it.
There is an area where I think it is maybe subject for alarm on the transparency of the JFK files. Is I saw Zero Hedge reporting this, and I went and looked for it myself. Zero Hedge was saying that they were looking at, there was a bunch of documents that were an interview questioning the Ruby Oswald working together connection, and Zero Hedge had pointed out that there are pages missing from the interview. And I did just a quick scan through on the exact document, and you will see if I pull up to right about, I think it was around in the 20s somewhere, you start to see, so page 27, page 30, page 98.
Missing pages.
Yeah. And like the entire interview, if you go down to the bottom, is 473 pages, and we got like 52 of them. Right. So there are certain things like that where there's a little bit of a subject for alarm. I was like, hey, it would be, and you can actually tell like where the page gaps are happening. Like, it's not just like it's a misnumbering of the page. It's like, no, a paragraph gets cut off and all of a sudden you're on a new subject. Right. That in itself is like, there's probably some juicy information there talking about, Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby questioning if they were working together. And then all of a sudden the pages are missing. Like, because Jack Ruby, obviously, he's the one that killed Oswald, on camera when he was walking to the courthouse. Is that how the story was?
Walking from the prison to the courthouse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Ruby himself has organized crime connections, nightclub owner, all this stuff. He's very much embedded in organized crime. So kind of putting that there, especially when we're talking about things like in the previous, the Agent Underhill story, talking about cliques working with organized crime and narcotics trade and things like that. And there's always been that allegation of the Kennedy family connection with organized crime. And that has always been a longstanding theory there.
Yeah, so the consensus theory is that there was a deal cut specifically to sway Chicago for the Kennedys, where the Kennedys said to the mob, "We won't go after you," right? And so if you help us with the election, and then RFK decides to go back on that and starts prosecuting the mob, and it's very interesting because you'll find ex-mobsters who claim this, who openly say, yeah, Jack Ruby was us, and that was because of this. So you can't tell if that's an information op or what, but there is substantial evidence of mob involvement with that for sure. I mean, and then Jack Ruby himself has a very interesting story of how he ends up where he ends up, right? Where he goes to prison, gets lung cancer and leukemia all at the same time, and passes away. And with his statements being that he killed Kennedy because he wanted to save Jackie from the pain of a trial. And also, did you know that the U.S. government is cutting off the hands of Jewish children across the Eastern Seaboard? And a lot of crazy stuff too. In fact, in Chaos, he advances the theory that there was an MK Ultra connection to Jack Ruby of some kind, because
the documents with Tucker Carlson, when Tucker Carlson was talking had the JFK whistleblower come to him kind of in his last weeks there of being at Fox News. That was one of the things that was in there, was that the psychiatrist that came in to see Jack Ruby before he shot Oswald was MK Ultra affiliated. Yeah, well, I mean, he's more than that, stronger than that. The MK Ultra guy. This is the guy who claimed credit of deprogramming the captured soldiers from Korea, who said that we were spraying Agent Orange or some kind of defoliant in Korea before Agent Orange was known as a thing that we were doing in Vietnam. And noting that Agent Orange was denied by the federal government as a thing we were spraying in Vietnam for many years until VA claims on it was so dramatic, and U.S. consensus on it was so profound that the government finally admitted it. He's the one who came over and said, no, that's actually, they've been programmed as POWs by the communists, and he deprogrammed them by convincing them to say that that was all BS. We didn't actually mean it.
Yeah, what was it? Jolly Roger? No, that's not right. Jolly West. That's it. I always say Jolly Roger like he's a pirate. Jolly West. And if you Google Jolly West, you'll find a very interesting. The guy killed an elephant with LSD. An elephant.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
his story.
Yeah, that's right.
He was so about LSD. He thought he could induce them into the mating rut by giving them LSD, and he ended up messing up the calculation and killing an elephant. And then he bragged about it. Then he said, like, I'm the elephant guy. And there's some interesting interviews that the guy who wrote Chaos, I'm forgetting his name right now, did with him, where he goes on to basically claim, that MK Ultra was a small thing. It was a big, but it was a big thing. Part of that being that after Jack Ruby shoots Oswald, there's a quote from the people who tackled him and restrained him that he was completely confused about what he had just done. So there's weird stuff like that, and then
has kind of like a hypnosis vibe to it. Which hypnosis is a thing, right? Like that is a thing. It's a studied thing in psychology, right? So who knows who knows, right? Like that becomes a whole other kind of rabbit trail to take down on there. Some other areas of interest that I think had the internet going here was something that is kind of new. I'm not quite sure how new this is, but there's a lot of alleging it's new, and Grok even said it's kind of new, is that the documents flesh out Lee Harvey Oswald's trip to Mexico City, where he met Soviet and Cuban embassy officials weeks before the assassination. And it's the documents in the newly released documents, it says that it's kind of suggesting that the CIA had much more tracking on him than they were letting on. That is just an area that I want to explore more, but that is kind of the vibe I was getting. And Grok said that was also the vibe that is to come away here. There's also our boy Liam had some interesting tweets coming from the documents just right before we started. Here's one. The JFK files show a Cuban consul in Chile believed that the Yankees or CIA assassinated Kennedy in order to resume the assault on Cuba. Compare it to the Maine incident, which was used as the pretext for the Spanish-American War and feared World War III.
So that fits with the predominant narrative, right?
That's also what Fidel Castro thought. Castro himself also said something similar.
Yeah. Well, so to clarify the timeline for people who aren't aware, JFK becomes president. He approves the Bay of Pigs under the idea that it would be a plausibly deniable thing. Alan Dulles, the CIA director from the creation of the CIA up until Kennedy, says we won't need anything. It's all already baked in. All you need to do is sit back and let it happen, with the knowledge that they probably needed air support. And then when it happened, they thought that because JFK was a popular elected official, it'd be too unpopular not to provide air support. But then JFK pulled back. The Bay of Pigs happens. And just a reminder, the Bay of Pigs was the CIA training ex-Cuban nationals as warfighters, moving them over there after low-grade, small weapons fire battles happening, and like almost terrorist-like activities happening across the Caribbean to harass the Cuban regime. After the Bay of Pigs fails with an invasion of those guys, of the Cuban ex-nationals, those folks, once that fails, Kennedy pulls out, fires Alan Dulles, and then basically has this whole back and forth with both his generals and the CIA. And it's interesting here, and this is really well done in a book. It's called JFK and the Unspeakable, and in that it details, because we have in the 1990s we were able to acquire the USSR side of this, where the USSR, we now have both Kennedy's letters and Khrushchev's letters back and forth, where they're sending secret messages through his family and close friends to each other to go around the generals and to avoid having their conversations spied upon by his own intelligence services. Right. And one of the notes that happened in my head, and it's early in the book, is the amount of energy wasted for these two to not just be able to call each other and talk man to man, because both of them, were actually really worried about what the people around them were going to say because of the war fever at the time and how dramatic it was. As they became closer, they end up having to like negotiate that out specifically after the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is what really ended the Cuban exile efforts, because Kennedy makes a promise: hey, if you get rid of these missiles in Cuba, we will stop harassing Cuba with these exile efforts, and we'll remove the missiles from Turkey. Right. And so he gives them what they need, and then we end the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that narrative totally fits with the mainstream, the consensus alternative history.
Well, it's also like, remember, Trump was getting spied on in his campaign and things like that, right? And he had generals lying to him too, right? Like, just there's similar vibes that exist there. It's always worth kind of having in the back of your mind. But also, what you're saying there also made me think of JFK shutting down Operation Paperclip, which was an idea that was presented to him of creating a false flag attack on those Cuban allies, and in order to spark war, right?
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting about that is what we tend to focus on is a part of Operation Paperclip that was terrorist activities in Miami that they could then blame on them. But even creepier is another part of Project Paperclip that really stood out to me was a false flag attack on a drone aircraft near Cuba, an unpiloted drone aircraft that they would blow up themselves and then blame on the Cubans when they came to investigate and then start the war with Cuba.
CIA was rowdy back then. They had some rowdy ideas.
I'm sure we don't do any kind of thing like that nowadays. I'm sure that's only in the 1960s when we do that. Yeah.
All the war news is always accurate, 100% accurate.
Right. Right. So what we tend to do is we tend to look at the furthest extreme of that, but there were a whole lot of steps in between. And there's actually part of Operation Paperclip was also this idea that you stir up more drama. You have to create a covert reason to do it, to get the American public on your side for an invasion of Cuba. Yeah. And keep in mind that, a lot of that, some of that's the Cold War dynamic. It's capitalism versus Marxism, but a large part of that is actually corporatism too. Cuba was dominated by the large corporate fruit companies all throughout the era before Castro. And I'm not saying that Castro regime is great. I'm not doing that. I'm a libertarian who is skeptical of all government. But keep in mind that a large reason why we care so much about that is because of the interest of corporate America and their desire to dominate the Caribbean and South America and Central America so that they can have colonies to exploit for the benefit of their import and export markets.
Dave, you say you're a libertarian and you don't endorse Castro, but here in the documents it says that egalitarian and libertarian ideals were a subversion tool of the Cubans to kind of give credence to the communist state. So I don't know what you're saying there. It's in the documents.
You got me. You found me out. It's in the documents, 100%.
I don't know.
You're not wrong.
Although our public posture on subversion in Latin America may be too firmly established for instant and radical revision, the following analysis is offered on the assumption that some change in emphasis is both possible and desirable now or at some time in the future. Given the existence of a communist state of either major persuasion, what is the likelihood that it will engage in subversion towards neighboring states? Total. All experience of the past 40 years demonstrates that the communist state emanates subversion as the sun emanates heat. But let us be clear that two kinds of subversion are involved. Hardware-centered, that is, funds, guns, tools of sabotage, and two, egalitarian and libertarian ideals.
Yeah, I'm sure Murray Rothbard was working for the Cuban government. That makes sense to me.
I knew it.
Well, this is that
man economy and state. Just Cuban Fidel Castro. He's the ghostwriter for Fidel Castro. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. I mean, what this evokes in me is that crazy FBI memo that went out. I don't remember when that was. I think it was Biden. I think it was the Biden era. Basically saying if you had a Gadsden flag or you talked at a school board meeting, you're agent provocateur for shady anti-government forces that should be surveilled by the FBI.
Oh, Brennan said that on national TV. He said that on like MSNBC or CNN or something, where he called out. He's like, anarchists, libertarians, Tea Partiers, like these are all domestic terrorists. You're like, that's the former head of the CIA saying that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So and then the impulse. It's just the incentive. If you're part of that power structure to get an out group that you can blame for all your ills and say, well, it's the anti-politics people, in order to best push them out and legitimate your own power and prestige.
Maybe some final thoughts on the JFK stuff here. So one thing that I think is maybe, because everybody was very quickly to say it's a nothing burger as of, right away out the gate. I opened up X right as soon as I heard the JFK files were released, and everybody's already saying it's a nothing burger, and there's nothing to see here. Actually, one thing that I wanted to point out, which I found interesting, was this is the type of misinformation that's kind of going on around it right now. Is I'm seeing a lot of people tweeting out this, where they're tweeting out files with the redacted black marks on them, right? And but then you just scroll down and I see somebody posted the exact same file without the redacted black marks. So everybody's saying that we were betrayed, we got all these redactions, blah, blah, blah. But be careful what you see on the internet, right?
Yeah. And I suspect we're going to have a lot of disinformation around this. I mean, if you're an intelligence agency with substantial investments in misinformation and disinformation, how would you deploy those resources, granted the fact that you have the CIA and so much momentum against those the intelligence agencies right now with the release of these sorts of files? Of course, what you're going to do is you're going to say it's a giant nothing. We've learned nothing new, et cetera, and just feed people a diet of black pills on the whole thing. And I don't think that's warranted at all.
Well, and I don't think. Let's just say hypothetically the CIA was 100% part of the JFK assassination. Do you think in the documents it's going to have the stamp of approval, signed in the CIA? Yes, we did it. No, that's not going to be in the documents, right? LBJ is just yes, hey, yes, guys, do
it. Yeah, exactly. No, I don't think there was any reasonable expectation for that to begin with. But that's the challenge of this whole question is. It requires some patience and analysis. So we've had it for a couple hours now. Let's let the sleuths do their work. We got to get the autists on this, get them reading 60,000 pages and connecting dots, and we'll hopefully be able to circle back around with some at least more buttressing of key information around the alternative theory, because we're never going to get justice here. It's well past time. And even if we were to get a smoking gun of some kind or enough evidence to persuade 99% of the public, we're still in a situation where they'll just say, well, church commission happened and we already changed all that stuff. We can't do that stuff anymore.
Well, and that's the big thing is
people because they're dead. All these people are gone. Right. Yeah. So this information should have came out in the early 2000s or the 90s, but they didn't. And so just the fact that we actually got them to release it is a non-trivial thing, because God damn it, our real government is not the one that we elect. It's the one that actually runs things. And if that's where we're at, if we're actually getting something from them for the first time, that's the equivalent of you live under a monarchy and they're finally letting up on your ability to worship something else or do something else. For the first time, we're actually getting something. So for God's sakes, guys, just own the win a little bit. Be happy that something good happened. And
that's the thing is, if there is to be a major bombshell that comes out of it, it's probably not going to be something that's just directly in your face. It's probably going to be something that has gone overlooked all these years, or there's some new CIA cable that comes in with because there are newly released documents amidst this, right? And or there's a new random name that got redacted, and now that opens up that opens up ties to Oswald to a bigger network. There's something like that that's probably going to be, after it's been digested and looked through over and over several times, there's going to be new kind of threads to pull on, and those would be the new bombshells, right?
Right. So if we find a stronger connection between Oswald and the Cuban exile effort, if we find the implication of a double agent in Mexico City at the same time as Oswald, that'd be a major buttress to some important parts of the evidence for Oswald like the original plan might have been that Oswald was working directly with the KGB. There's a lot of stuff here that can undermine the core narrative of both the Warren Report as well as just red pilling people. And that's the real win here. It has nothing to do with
the red pilling is actually maybe the most important part of it, right?
Absolutely, it's 100% of it. I mean, like, think about it. Like, you can't prosecute LBJ or Alan Dulles or any of the major players here. You're not going to find whoever that guy was that called the KGB embassy or the Mexican embassy for the USSR and couldn't barely speak Russian but claimed to be Oswald when he was fluent in Russian. We're not going to find that stuff. That's going to be really tough. I mean, maybe we do, but it's going to be really tough to find the further down those chains and connections that are so suspicious. But at minimum, having more things to buttress around that hopefully will be the actual the thing that we need to undermine confidence in these institutions that are obviously so corrupt.
Let's move on to the crazy foreign political actions that are going on today now, not things that happened 60 years ago.
Right.
What is going on in the Middle East right now, Dave? Let's move in and start talking about some of this stuff. There's been stuff in Gaza, a bunch of momentum with Iran. What's happening here?
Yeah. So what happened this week was Donald Trump effectively renewed the war in Gaza and the war against the Houthis in Yemen. So I'll go back to the beginning and start up top just to remind everybody the context. We have covered this before. Prior to October 7th, Yemen was the number one largest international human rights problem prior to Ukraine and Israel-Palestine. Mm-hmm. The short story is Saudi prince comes into power. He wants to improve his street cred. If you really want the full depth on that, you got to check out Scott Horton. He has an incredible case for how much of a war of choice this was, but it has a lot to do with Saudi domination over Yemen getting out of control when there was a civil war, and then they picked sides, and then they got betrayed, and it's this whole thing. But it was a substantial U.S.-Saudi effort to establish what was effectively a starvation blockade of 21 million people. That's according to the Council on Foreign Relations. Not exactly.
There's a famous moment of Obama saying that in order to placate the Saudis, those were his exact words when talking about that blockade, because effectively the international community was like, yo, we're going to bring you into everything. You guys make coffee. Cool. That'll be 90% of your economy. And then we put in this economy, and then all they had was coffee. And then everybody started to starve, right? That's kind of the situation that had occurred.
Well, in a substantial bombing campaign, right? We're not talking about tanks rolling around in Yemen so much as a water to bombing campaign that's been going on for 10 years. So the U.S. support of that was critical, right? We were refueling the aircraft. We sold them the aircraft in the first place. We were repairing the aircraft because you got to repair an aircraft almost every time it flies. Targeting of targets, all that kind of stuff was all America.
Yeah, my understanding is that we had Americans fueling the jets, we pretty much were doing everything up into the point of the jets actually taking off to do the bombs we were doing, right?
Yes, exactly. So after October 7th, the Houthis increased their harassment of vessels in the Red Sea, and that's the area between the Arab Peninsula and Africa right there. And there's a lot of commerce goes through there. Not a lot of American commerce, but a lot of European and Asian commerce goes to that area. Their supposed war aim was to end the blockade of Gaza, meaning let in, assistance to Gaza and medicine and food and all that kind of stuff. That escalated with launching rockets at Israeli targets. The Houthis then stopped with the ceasefire that was negotiated between Donald Trump before he became president with Hamas and Bibi Netanyahu. But fighting continues in Yemen this whole time. It's just because it's no longer the major crisis, it's just downgraded. Even when it was the major crisis, I remember talking to people and be like, there's a war in Yemen. It's it's a huge crisis right now. There was no knowledge in America of it at all, despite our role when we talk about it on the podcast or talk about any individual on the street or whatever. So, but yeah, fighting continues in Yemen, and remember there was these Yemenis pirates that were on rubber boats, going up to these cargo vessels that are completely undefended and messing with them and taking stuff and whatnot. And then, of course, the private industry then armors up and figures out ways to navigate that. But once with us, what happened this week was with the support of Donald Trump, supposedly. It's hard to imagine that it wouldn't be with the support because of the way that the hostage exchanges have gone. And of course, Trump's bellicose thing that he does, that they, have, re-engaged in Gaza and therefore re-engaged with the Houthis. And that really ticked Donald Trump off. He put out this threat, all right, on Truth Social. I have it linked here, Kyle.
Yeah, here.
I want to bring it up. If you want to zoom in, you could read it here. And your best Donald Trump impersonation, please.
Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by the Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen who are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from and are created by Iran. I'm not doing the whole thing.
You got to capitalize Iran. He's like such a boomer. Like, you got to capitalize the entire word.
He doesn't write his tweets. That's the important thing here, though, too, right?
Oh no, that's
the little secret, is he doesn't write his tweets. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence, in quotes. Every short... I do love when he puts some good quotations.
That cannot be a conspiracy. That has to be.
No. This is dude.
Think about it. Like your professor conference, like so-called intelligence. Like that's got to be. Come on.
I have talked with somebody before back in the 2016 era of Trump. That was in the room for Trump tweets. And like, it is a collaborative effort. That is what I have been told, and that people are like just throwing ideas around, right? Like, so. But anyways, to finish it off, every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from the point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences. And those consequences will be dire.
Mm-hmm. You did it. You made it all the way through. Well done, sir. So this is and what's interesting there is the degree to which there was a buildup of these things. Like over the last month, we've seen this neocon, like Iran is really the threat thing bubbling up. And, my perspective every time I saw it was like, oh, come on, guys. Like, what is the connection here? There's such weak connection. I'm not saying there's no connection between the Houthis and Iran. Is there a weapons deal? I think that totally makes sense. Iran and Saudi Arabia are theological and geopolitical enemies. So there's all kinds of reasons to believe that would be true. The question is what is America's role? And if we didn't have the end of the ceasefire, we likely wouldn't have a re-engagement by the Houthis in this case, because their incentive, what they're trying to do is stir up, Muslim and Arab fervor using Palestine as their case for doing so against the established, Arab forces such as Saudi Arabia, which is becoming it has been a client state of the United States in many ways, although not well controlled client state. But since the Abrahamic Accords and other efforts, has become very closely tied with Israel. So that's their only play at that point if they want to stir up a Muslim uprising against the establishment forces across the Middle East, at least the anti Saudi Arabian.
Mm-hmm. You had put a clip in here, Dave, of Trump on the campaign trail. I believe this was in a Tim Pool interview. Liam recently posted what super viral. And this is, and the big thing here is this was campaign Trump, and keeping in mind that this is typical politician promising. Well, not promising, but his analysis out of power versus obviously what we just read, his analysis in power. Yeah. So here, let's play it.
I look at your policies, I see secure the borders, bring jobs back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary. You know, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around, and we had no problems. Today, the whole world is on fire.
It's actually funny if you hear the shouting in the background. This interview was done right before he took the stage at the Libertarian National Convention.
Interesting.
That's what the shouting in the background there was.
Yeah. Well, and but it goes to show you, like, the everything was great when I was president thing. There's an element of truth to that, but it's largely like a selection bias problem, right? The Houthis were going on throughout his presidency as well. It was a problem then as well. It was just a lower level problem, and something that his administration was continuing from the Obama administration. So this is not a thing that he ended. It's just a thing that they're doubling up on and bombing on when they're in the Biden regime.
I do want to, because this thought crossed my mind about a week ago. Trump tweeted out that he killed the leader of ISIS, and there was a piece of me there that was sitting there like, I thought he killed the leader of ISIS in his previous administration. I thought he eradicated ISIS. I thought that's what he kept saying on the campaign trail.
Terrorist math is a bitch, isn't it? You kill it. It's the same thing. Like after from 2023 till today, Hamas has been devastated, supposedly, and yet, according to Israel, there's just as many Hamas fighters now as there was then. Mm-hmm. Because that's always the thing to remember when we're talking about foreign policy, because people have such short-term memories. They just kind of they're emotionally attached to certain words of like good or bad. And so ISIS bad, and Trump killed ISIS in his first administration, but like they don't think through the then logic of like, but wait, how did he kill ISIS again just now? Like, I thought he, people just don't think, because they don't know the foreign policy. They don't know the dynamics in the Middle East and all this stuff, right? Well, and it largely put a stall. He put a stall in Syria. He tried to get troops out of Syria, but didn't end Syria. Like they did, like they were still running weapons and all that kind of stuff there. And throughout the time frame that we're talking about throughout the Biden administration, we wound up in the situation where in the last months of the Biden administration, the ISIS affiliated Al Nusra Front, Al Qaeda affiliated HTS is now in control of Syria, right? So like there wasn't really a change in foreign policy. I'm not saying he didn't want to change in foreign policy in Syria, but it didn't happen, right? And so like how much of that is he own? Well, there's debatable, but you're still in a situation where you're like, are we going to change? Especially now that we're circling back around again to permit, Netanyahu not to go into phase two, not to move on, but rather to go back into Gaza with bombings. The bombings this week are the worst bombings we've had since 2023, and they're devastating. And you can't underestimate that. I mean, like it's a huge variable in this whole thing. That and one that is he really going to solve, or is he just going to give Israel everything that they want? Because it's not going to be solved that way. Because what Israel wants, that's their interest. That's their interest that they're going to pursue. Is that an American interest? Is that a thing that is actually compliant with what America's vision is for this area? I don't think so. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because as much as we blame every Houthi rocket that strikes American destroyer or a cargo ship on the Iranians, so too does the Arab world see every bomb that Israel drops as an American investment and an American bomb. So it just makes us less safe. At the end of the day, it's not in our interest to do this at all.
I wasn't laughing because of what you were saying, Dave, but I was laughing because the tweet that you had sent me. And I just, this is incredible, actually. Secretary Rubio says, well, first of all, it's wrong to think about it as we're bombing Yemen. We're bombing the Houthis, and they happen to be located in Yemen. that is an incredible statement. I love that statement. That is so incredible, actually.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a Israeli, messaging sort of thing. We're not bombing Palestinians. We're bombing terrorists who happen to be 3 years old. Yeah. That's kind of how we're thinking about it. But Trump's tweet indicates the same thing. The people of Yemen hate the Houthis. Are we doing regime change now in Yemen? Is that what we're doing? How do we get to accord with a government that is entrenched? Additionally, if they did, would they be able to survive 10 years of bombings? Right? And we're gonna bomb them more and think that's gonna change things? Like it's that insanity question. We're just doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I don't see the pathway out of this.
And also, there's another thing there, because I believe my Yemenis history is not up to all the par, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, on the lead up to a lot of this stuff, I want to say in 2015, 2014, somewhere in there, yep. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, we had participated in an ousting of the previous leader, and then we basically set up a democracy there, and there was only one person on the ballot under the Secretary of State under Hillary Clinton's watch. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And then what had occurred was the guy that we had ousted basically came back with a bunch of the rebels and teamed up with the rebel groups that we had originally armed to come and oust the person that we had set up in a faux democracy, right? Like that's kind of the dynamic when we're talking about Yemen, of all the lead up to this nonsense of how everything's going now, correct?
Yeah, it is easy to see Yemen as another example of intervention backfiring and creating religious extremism and, an ethnic strife in a country that then results in us having to just bomb them forever.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and it's a really great way for Northrop Grumman to make money, but I don't think it's a sensible foreign policy at all for the United States.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so the last part of this, and I did want to get into this because there has been some interesting information ops. Since this happened, there was reports from a Saudi newspaper that the U.S. had sunk a relatively famous, recently introduced signals intelligence ship from the Iranians. And, that made a whole round of the media cycle, but then was denied by the U.S. government. Now, it could still be true that the U.S. government, this was stuff that wasn't supposed to go out, but it could also be true in a way to stir up war fever, is kind of like indicating, well, we're already at war with Iran. We sunk one of their battleships, and therefore, we're already there. I think this is an example of the latter. That was likely the Saudis really want us to engage directly, so they don't have to spin the cast, Therefore, they're trying to kind of gin up war fever against the Houthis more directly.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was reported ridiculously, too, at the time. When it very first dropped, it was like, from a Saudi newspaper, I was like, interesting thing for a Saudi newspaper to report with no, other confirming, information from the U.S. government or anyone else.
Yeah.
And now the U.S. government's actually waited and said, no, that didn't happen. So then it was always paired with like cool videos of like, fighter jets taking off from carrier ships and stuff like that. Like, it's like, it made it look like it was, a legit thing. But yeah. And the Iranians are also not playing games too. They released like this whole disinformation operation on how they're going to bomb the hell out of Israel now that they're done playing games, et cetera, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they've been done playing games for 2 decades now. They're always done playing games. This is the time.
Yeah, well, they do have Russian hypersonic missiles that are probably, and we covered this too. The very last exchange of barrages between Israel and Iran, were far more deadly the last time around because the Iron Dome struggles at things going at that, I think it's Mach 13 or 14, that faster speed that hypersonic missiles can achieve. And if that's a real threat to Israel at that point, that's what we don't know. So I think there's a lot to be developed there. We'll keep covering it. And I think people, this is the time. If you're the person that does not want to see another endless war, invading Iran is much worse than invading Iraq.
Yeah, very much so.
Much worse than invading Afghanistan. A much larger population, much more technologically proficient. And it's, I'm not
more difficult terrain too.
The US, yeah, well,
just the terrain aspect is really the terrain. Like my understanding of the Iranian military is their anti-air is like exceptional, and like all these terrorist groups that we've been having to deal with in Iraq, Afghanistan, also like they don't have, like, people think that Iran is just like us walking through Afghanistan, right? Like it's completely different society, far more civilized, far more advanced. Their actual military technology is way stronger. They're actually like good allies with China. You know, like all of these things come into play here. It's not the same thing as Afghanistan, where Afghanistan is much more like an easy proxy zone between the different empires of the world, right? Iran is a little bit more than that.
And it's one of those things too that this sort of engagement will completely ruin all the momentum that we've achieved on ending endless wars and ending the war in Ukraine and ending all these things, right? Because Russia's not going to be happy if we start invading Iran, which is right to the south of its border, an ally that we forced Russia into having in the first place.
Trump's mandate and how much he can get done gets greatly limited by this, because now there's all these people that will feel burned because like they joined because they're anti-war or whatever. Like the anti-war messaging was really strong, and a lot of the support structure, especially going into the midterms with the Republicans, like all of that will begin to fade the more that the war drums start going. Like America is very war weary right now.
Yeah, for sure. And like, imagine the moment too. He has every card to play right now. If he actually backs a peace deal in Israel and gets the peace deal done in Ukraine, Russia, he can walk in. He can have 3 more years and with 8 months of real peace and prosperity. That would be a tremendous win for his administration. Be a transformational, put him on a dollar sort of presidency. And he could squander it all because he's worried about looking weak in front of Iran rather than cutting a deal.
It would also give the Democrats no leg to stand on. Like this will become a tool for the Democrats to campaign with in the midterms. Yes. And like, it's like, do we want to have a super majority in the Senate or do we want to lose the Senate? Like that is another issue here. And it's like all these other issues that you really care about with Trump, of like immigration and things like that, tax cuts, all these things, like those things become increasingly less likely the more that mandate starts to go. And like, to me, the war with Iran and drumming up those war drums is one of those things that, can really decrease the likelihood of all these things that we want to see Trump get done.
100%. Yeah. So right now, the Democrats have historically low polling. Predictably, right now, the Democrats are sitting at crisis points with their public support, and they're not even in power. And that just goes to show you, like, going around defending all the institutions is not popular right now. The American people see through it. If you're defending USAID, it's not winning you that message at all. And then their own party support's falling off as Chuck Schumer collaborates with Johnson and Trump to sign on a continuing resolution.
The AOCs are really angry. It's splitting the party so much. There's a civil war.
Yeah. And so like all that support evaporating, he has a tremendous opportunity if he could just keep them on their back foot and focus on the important things, you know, like his deregulation efforts, like his, peace efforts, like his tax cuts and things like that. He could be a very popular president in his second term. And, and the thing that's going to kill me, Kyle, the thing that's going to drive me insane is the minute this actually really blows off. And even if he gets peace in Russia, Ukraine, but then goes to war with Iran, we're going to see the resurgence of the anti-war Democrats. And I'm going to be so freaking jaded, man. I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to go freaking crazy because it's going to be like nothing happened between Bush and Trump. It's going to be like they're just going to come right back and just slot into the same place. And it's a terrible prediction, but that's my prediction. I think that's what happens.
Although that being said, there is something that I am enjoying, like I'm liking that I'm seeing from the right that gives me some hope in the future. Is there is a large swath of the right, which in a lot of ways I feel like they're like the politically educated right. They're not just kind of like the people that are in it for the passion of we love Trump kind of a thing. Like they are much more ideological in a sense, or they have like their own views and they're like there's a lot of these types of people that I don't see them just like conforming to Trump, like war mode Trump. If that ends up what we are getting, like that's positive for me in the future. Is like I am seeing those types. There are the types that like Trump can do no wrong no matter what, right? Like those people are unfortunate. There's also a lot of the people that are really trying to stir opposition that exists. But I am
Agent
happy to see this kind of, there's a lot of people where I'm looking at them and I'm like, you're an asset. Like it's becoming more and more crystal clear that it's like, especially in the division that is being sowed right now, it's like either useful idiot or asset. Like there's no other option in it. But yeah, it's just 100%. That's just kind of what I'm noticing that on the right is I don't feel like we're just going to see this massive swath of the entire right wing all of a sudden being neocon again. I don't see that. I think that there's going to be some of that, some resurgence there, but it's not going to be all of it. Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yeah. You might be right about that, Dan. Mick. I think that there's a lot of truth in that. So the last bit that happened this week was Trump put out this also a very interesting Truth Social message about the Joe Biden pardons. Yeah, and his argument is that Joe Biden did not actually deliver real, authentic pardons at the end of his term. So,
so he said,
me too. I'll give you my Trump impression.
Okay, yeah, you sure go for it.
All right, we'll zoom in a little bit so I can see it.
Oh yeah,
it's really small on my screen here.
It doesn't really zoom well. Twitter has this problem.
The pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden
I'll handle it so that I have a better view of it because I have a big monitor here.
All right.
The pardons in quotes, always good quotations. On a Trump tweet.
The pardons,
quote unquote, that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and no further force or effect, all in caps, because of the facts that they were done by Autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the unselect committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of the country, crooked Joe Biden. So this is this is a fascinating argument here. Is essentially Joe Biden was not cognizant of the pardons he was giving, and therefore they are void. This is the argument that's being laid forward. Correct?
Yeah. It's kind of like the combination of Autopen plus that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what he means by unselect committee.
That's what he calls the. That's what he calls the Jan 6. And that's what he calls the select committee. That's his nickname for it. Is the unselect committee.
Oh, okay.
That's what he calls it. You gotta watch more Trump rallies, man.
Okay, so. Yeah. No, I watched some, but not all. I got books to read, man. All right, all right. Let's break this apart. So you have the Autopen question, which is, of course, the counter narrative to that immediately came out and said, the unfortunate thing is the way he wrote this actually leads you to believe that the Autopen's the important part, not the Biden wasn't aware of them was the important part, but of course, yeah. So of course you got Newsmax and all these other News Nation and others who are like, well, but every president uses an Autopen. In fact, Donald Trump used an Autopen, and it's probably true too. He signed 15,000 pardons or 1,500 pardons in a day.
But he was generally cognizant of what he was doing. Would be there.
That's the important question.
He gave the order, yes, this is what's going to happen. Where it's not clear that Biden actually gave the order that he's even aware of what's going on when it happens.
Right. And that's the important and fascinating component of this. Besides the fact that can a president declare something null and void, which I'm sorry, isn't a power that the president can do. He can have that opinion, but he cannot, there's no legal force behind his tweet declaring them null and void. Right?
I'm down for the president to just call things void. I'm down for it. If we can start calling things void, I'm down.
So, but
it is a question. The legal aspect is the question here. It's is there any power to this? Which I think that this is a thing that's going to have to go to court, and it is going to be going to court, right?
Yeah. It would need to be an FBI investigation into the actual processes that went here. Perhaps an inspector general investigation, but FBI might be appropriate given.
Well, it's like if there's emails or something like that suggests that, hey, we're just going to do this without Biden's approval or something like that. Like that would be a real smoking gun. But like it does play into this, like we had to go through this whole emperor wears no clothes scenario for the last 4 years, where we're all supposed to pretend like Biden was fine, and clearly he wasn't the running the show. And this plays into that massively, where it's like, the people that were running the show were essentially giving themselves pardons. Like that's what we're getting here, right? Yeah.
And so, of course, the MAGA right immediately jumped to like, he's going to prosecute Fauci, and that's really what's going on here. And I mean, maybe long term that could happen, but it seems unlikely to me. But that said, like an actual prosecution of the process to adjudicate just exactly how much in control Biden was of his own presidency, I think it's important for the history books. I think it's important for the entire, like, once again, the meta story here of our confidence in this institution, especially amongst the media, who called these things, this whole thing a conspiracy theory and cheap fakes. Remember that? Yeah. So that whole thing is where the gain is really for me. I don't anticipate Fauci going to prison or any of the predictions from the MAGA right, but I do. I would love to see this actually adjudicated with an evidentiary standard and not just a president tweeting out.
Would be fascinating. Like it would be a fascinating process to see it all. Actually, this whole thing just reminded me of something I didn't poll, but I did see that there was a document saying this in the JFK files. There was a piece in the JFK files that said JFK Jr. called Joe Biden a traitor, and it was like
JFK Jr. or RFK Jr.? I think it was RFK Jr.
I think it was JFK Jr. is what I saw in the documents.
Well, I did find
maybe it was RFK. Maybe it was an RFK Jr. thing.
Yeah, I think it was RFK. And the debunk I found was that someone writing as RFK sent a letter threatening to kill him, calling him a traitor, and writing from Massachusetts. But it was there was fingerprints that were suspicious and other things, and there was actually an FBI investigation before.
That's good to clear up.
It's more. It's but there's.
The document I probably saw was one page, and then it probably had the rest of that story on the next page, right?
Well, I found it was in a community note, because I'm a community note participant, and so that's what it linked to.
I am too. Finally,
once again. Oh, good. Yeah, good for you.
They find literally like a year. Like I had the application when it first happened, and it was like a few weeks ago. All of a sudden, I got a notification. Hey, you can do community notes now. I was like, what? What took so long?
Nice. Oh, man. Well, pro tip: do not engage in any martyr-made community note debates because it will get you, knocked down quickly.
Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way through this, make sure to like, subscribe, do all the things, and also come join our Discord and come chat with us. Thanks. See ya. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com.